Why should I stay silent? It's a fair question. Because when we hear be silent, it often sounds unnecessary, even uncomfortable. And yet more and more people are pointing in this direction. So what is silence, really? And why does it matter? Silence does not mean not speaking. Silence is something else. It is what you begin to notice within all activity. It has always been there, in everything, and it will always be there. When your attention turns towards silence, the endless flow of thoughts begins to pause, not because you stopped them, but because you are no longer following them. At first this feels strange, because the mind does not like silence. Silence moves in the direction of less thinking, and the mind depends on thinking. So the moment your attention shifts away from the mind, it begins to resist. It tells you, this is pointless. You're missing something. Just one more thought. The mind wants to keep moving, because for the mind, nothing is ever perfect. It always wants to improve, fix, continue. And silence feels like stopping, so it pushes you forward, so you don't stop. But silence is not something the mind can understand. It has no shape, no form. It cannot be analyzed or controlled. And because of that, the mind will question it, at least in the beginning. Turning towards silence requires something simple, but not always easy: consistency. Because the mind will resist, sometimes strongly. There can be periods that feel uncomfortable, even unsettling. And without understanding what is happening, this can feel confusing. But even with understanding, it can still feel intense. And yet, something important begins to shift. You start to see that both are needed, the mind and silence, but not in the way we usually live. Most of us let the mind lead and ignore silence, and this creates tension. Because the mind wants one thing, and something deeper within us wants something else. Silence is that deeper layer. It is not something we create. At first it seems like something we turn toward, but then we begin to see it has always been there. And here is the practical part. You don't need to solve everything. You don't need to fix every problem. You don't need to understand everything. You only need to do one thing: sit in silence. Because silence has a different nature. It transforms things on its own, without effort, without control. When you turn towards silence, what feels stuck begins to move. What feels heavy begins to soften. What feels complicated begins to clear. Not because you solved it, but because silence does what the mind cannot. And this is what makes it difficult for the mind. Because in silence, you begin to realize there was never control. Everything unfolds on its own, in its own timing, in the way that is best for you. But the mind wants speed. It wants answers. It wants control. So it resists. And still, if you stay with silence, even for a short time, you begin to notice something. Your state changes, not because you forced it, but because you allowed something else to take the lead. And over time, this begins to reflect in your life as well. But this requires consistency, not intensity, not perfection. Just return it again and again. What happens when you don't follow every thought, when you don't continue every inner conversation? This is the practice. Simple, direct, available at any moment, and at some point, a deeper recognition may appear. You are not your thoughts. You are not the voice in your head. You are the silence in which all of this appears. And this cannot be understood by the mind, only experienced. Because the mind is different in everyone. But silence is the same in all of us. It is what connects us. It is what remains. And perhaps it is all we ever needed.